It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Lincoln Mali to you. Lincoln came to Rhodes University in 1988, obtained his Bachelor of Arts in 1990 and his LLB in 1992. A distinguished alumni awardee and an experienced retail banker with over 18 years in the banking industry. Allow me to welcome Mr. Lincoln Mali.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Honorable Vice Chancellor, leadership of the university, fellow alumni, all the organizers, people who put this together, Terrell and team, thank you for bringing us today. The SRC leadership, thank you for hosting us. It is good to come home, and to come home in this manner. And I think that, Prof, I think you've captured so much of how we feel. And it's difficult for somebody to understand unless you see the world through the lens which we have and the experiences that we have. To be asked to come home again has meant a lot. And I think that it will open more conversations with others who couldn't be here today. The record for the longest speech in South Africa is held by a very prominent politician who, after speaking for 3 days, said, "Madam Speaker, that concludes my opening remarks." I have no desire, no interest to either match or exceed that record. But I have an opportunity to share some of my experiences and the experiences of others on this journey. And I wanted to capture a couple of things to talk about our experience at Rhodes. First, I'm going to talk about the social scene. There were things called formal dinners. They were not for everybody. There were those who loved formal dinners. It gave them an opportunity to dress up. And they had to find partners who they had to school in the courtesies of formal dinners. Then there were garden parties that were also unique to Rhodes. And only people who went to Rhodes understood what those are. Then there were dolls. Dolls was where you met people, where you tried to close deals and make sure that the conversations could take to the next level. The music and the dances leave much to be desired. I really think that if social media was here, so many good names would be embarrassed because of the things that they used to do. Then there were the house parties. The cheapest alcohol you could find in those house parties. After 2 glasses, everybody started to speak Chinese. And everybody started to look pretty or handsome. And you also thought you were handsome. Then there was drinking at the club. Up here. There were guys there who worked there. I think it's Eric. I think that he was specially chosen to help us all the time, to keep the drinks flowing and the tongues wagging. That was Eric. Then there were drinks in the guys' rooms. So you would buy in bulk. And when you drink, you have to drink for the money that you put in. The fact that you may not have, cannot have any more is irrelevant. You have contributed. Then there were bashes. In the bashes, you separated who was who. There were times when you would walk in and they would say this thing, "Amatoge too, oh Lincoln Nabani." Well, I was something then, but obviously I'm Nabani now. Then there was chilling in the common rooms. common rooms were such an amazing bonding place, especially in the women's races. You really found an environment where people could get to know one another and chill. Winter times were special because people could sit together, girls would sit there, heaters, and talk about things because it gave them an opportunity to get to know one another at a personal level. The second thing I want to talk about is a bit of sports and culture. There was an organization called Sadisco. It didn't really excel in the sporting environment, but it excelled in pulling people together and giving them opportunities to play sport and enjoy sport and interact with a broader audience than people would have had. Sadisco, you would come here and Sadisco would try to recruit you. Then we met a guy, the late Kabelo, and he came from a very good school. So Kabelo, what do? I'm into rowing. Mvuzo said, fine, you start a rowing club for Sadisco. There was no canoe, there was nothing. This guy was going to be starting the development. Then in football, there were soccer teams inside the campus. Brutal rivalry, machoism, that ego thing about teams, Juluka, Maputo, Gezinye, these teams, new generations, these teams are amazing. And people would talk for a long time after every victory. I remember I did the worst thing, to move from Juluka to join Maputo. It was felt I'd sold out because the people from Maputo were mainly from Gauteng. How could I join Maputo? But again, we wanted to have, and there were more from the Black Consciousness movement. How could I join them? But again, we wanted to influence and be part of a broader society. Then there was softball. This softball was championed by Mvuzo Mbebe. He didn't have much skill, but what he lacked in skill, he compensated with passion and drive. The softball team was well supported. Half of us didn't understand how it was played, but we just wanted somebody to hit the ball. Then there was the netball team. Man, we supported that team. If we went to any university to play, our strongest support was there. We were getting there. Yeah! And if they score, we would run on the field and do all of that. Then there was the rugby team. Rugby team was amazing for this. The rugby team was amazing because we went to go and play in some of the most rural areas in the Transkei. Some of the fields were like this. You couldn't see what was on the other side. And as you were coming with the ball, there would be a cow coming. And the guys there were determined that these guys from Rhodes, they must be dealt with because they are a bit light and everything. And I remember a day we played in Kikriha. And the late Mondengendane was the scrum half, and I was the fly half. We had a formidable backline. People like Sim Chabalala and others. By the end of the game, their shorts were still white, the entire backline. But myself and Monde had bruises everywhere. Because every time we got the ball, they said, kick it! Kick it! They didn't want to have anything to do with this. Then, Prof, you talked about how our society changed. In 1991, there was a call for unity. There were two teams for Rhodes football. There was Rhodes SAU and there was Rhodes Sadisco. Two teams, one white, one black. And there was a call for unity. You know, when we talk about transformation and change, we talk about it in abstract terms, but you're dealing with human beings. So they started a thing where they said there'll be 7 asides played. And then it so happened that the top call of the seven-a-side for the white team and the top core of the seven-a-side for the black team met at the finals. What a game it was. Well watched as Sunshine was playing that game. So we played. We did every trick you can imagine. Putting the ball between the guy's legs, getting like this. People were laughing. When it comes to tricks, I'm sure the score was 50-0 in our favor. But the actual score was something like 12-2. Because the White Oaks got the ball, they went, scored. So at the end of that day to choose a coach, the coach ended up being the guy who was the coach of the former white team. So we're now an integrated team. So soccer players were it. You know, you have an imaginary chewing gum when you go to practice. So we go there, now we come to practice, because it's now picked a squad. We're now a squad of the main team of the whole university. We went there. And then the coach says, hey, what's that? Look. These are cocks. So he says, what's cocks? What is the English word for cocks? He says, soccer boots. I'm not. He says, why are you wearing those things? So we've come to play. He says, we told you to bring this. He says, all of you, there's no practice today. Come back tomorrow with running shoes. So we brought running shoes the next day. Hey, then we went out. Hey, all of the guys that we were laughing at on Saturday, who were in the former white team, were laughing. We were cramps, everything. Guys like Graham Joffy, Ant, and others were hilarious. They were just laughing at us because our fitness levels were not that great. Then after 2 weeks of this running thing, we then go to the field. We're now hoping for football. No. Another week of just sprints and things. The fourth week, we start to see a ball. The guy says we'll do set pieces. What's that? Okay, guys, we're going to shoot. He says, when you shoot, guys, get your head down, keep the ball like this. Ball over. Every time we get this right, we realize. But over that time, we became a team. And we would play out in Port Elizabeth and all those places. Then, in the statistical days, we played a game at Wits. This game was dominated by a guy called John Wade, who ended up playing for the national team. He was brilliant. In the first 10 minutes of the game, the score was 4-0 in favor of Wits. Then a storm came. As soon as the storm came, the people from there know the storm, they ran. We also saw that everybody's running, we also ran. And they ran to a place called Bozoli, which is the equivalent of the club. When we got there, we saw people were drinking. Obviously, we were being beaten 4-0, people are drinking, we just drank. After 15 minutes, they said, let's go back to the field. They said, we're confused. We are not going back. So they still argue that we forfeited the game, but we said we went to Bozoli and we stayed and did what was done. Then there was creative arts. Creative arts was an amazing thing. Some of the best skills and talent. There is now Bishop Sidwell Mkhotu. At the time he was studying at the Divinity. He was one of the main actors. When you now see him perform at church, you see this was creative arts training. Then one of the things that was so unique about Rhodes are the societies. The societies were so rich and so varied. Each one of those societies had an identity of its own. And they really, really made the institution to be meaningful for every group of people. You know, Hindu Student Society, Muslim Student Society, ISEC, RMR, all of these institutions really, really, really gave people. Then you also had other societies that were not formal, like in Ngopsok. Ngopsok were those guys that had no relationship with campus. They were called Amangobi. Right? And then there was Romsok, obviously, which was a very exclusive club of those that had a relationship on campus. And there was a fair discrimination. Right? So the third thing I want to talk about is the politics on campus. We're the Black Student Movement.
Yes,
This was the organization that gave us our identity, that brought us together, that led us through a lot. And from the first time you walk into campus, the first people you would see is the BSM people. They would be here weeks before to prepare, take bags of people, carrying them all the way to the top, asking where are you from, what do you need, come here, do you need these studies, do you need this, all of that. That for me was the epitome of what leaders should do, to serve rather than to be served. It mattered not. You only found out later that that guy was president of BSM. But what they were there to introduce who they are. Then would recruit and do all of that. BSM was an amazing organization. And I think it gave so much of us a lot of our training and guidance. Then there were the underground structures that were here. I don't know how many layers of underground structures that were there, Honorable Vice Chancellor. I belong to 4. There may have been others that Bradieza and them will know, because they were, you know, the leaders, the veterans, who only intervened when there were problems. But these underground structures were always careful never to usurp the right of students to determine what things would be done. They never determined what BSM should do, because BSM belonged to the students, and things were discussed in the main hall, all of those meetings. Those meetings, those people could debate on any topic under the sun. Any debate you raise, there's a new idea, you know? But that is how we grew and understood the way we work. One of the things that was unique about Rhodes was non-racialism was practiced and believed. And I think organizations like End Conscription Campaign, NUSAS and SASPU played a big role in making us to understand one another beyond what the past wanted us to be. Because people came from different backgrounds. They only started to mix here. And having those comrades, white comrades, in NUSAS, SASPU and others, allowed us to understand the way people worked. Many of us didn't even know anything about media, but we wanted pamphlets. People like Ibs would sort out a pamphlet in no time. Obviously, some of the pamphlets were not coming only just to campus, they were going to other areas. As I was driving from East London, just going through the villages from East London to here, just thinking about places we went to go and drop pamphlets at ungodly hours, sent by some of the veterans whose names will not be mentioned. Bradiza, I will not, I'm sure you're still in the underground. I will not mention. The other thing was that the leadership here was prolific in inviting people to come and address the student body. Some of the biggest highlights was Chris Hani coming to campus. It was a memorable event. Him speaking at the Great Hall. Some of the things he said and who he was remains the kinds of leaders we want. Indandazizwe, aindandaziso. People who are here to serve others, who stand for something bigger than themselves. That is what we miss. That is why when we say where leaders learn, we should be teaching them that type of leadership. The selflessness, the humility, not the sense of arrogance and entitlement that we see from those who rule us today. Mandela's visit to Grahamstown was something else. It just was one of those things that he comes out and he comes to visit Grahamstown. We shared it with the whole of Grahamstown, but we felt special as Rhodes of all of the things that we were doing behind the scenes to make that happen. Also, I think there were other principles we learned about diversity. Terrell is here. I'm sure she's busy somewhere. I asked Terrell to connect me with Rod Amner. I had not spoken to Rod Amner in 30 years. But there is something that I learned from him in a debate, and it was a fierce debate. Debate sometimes is like social media. Nobody says I'm wrong in social media. I mean, nobody. You just fight until you've run out of data. So when we were going to form SASCO, there were debates about some of the principles. And one of the principles that was there was we must deal with homophobic tendencies. And at the time, we didn't think that that principle was important. And we argued vociferously against it. And I remember in this heated debate with Rob Amner, I was like, no, this thing of guys hitting on guys, and it's not acceptable, And then I remember Rod saying something, this is now in a group of people. He says, who says that those guys want you? You know, when somebody has taken you out, you may not agree, but you know you've been taken out. And I remember from that conversation, there was so much reflection that I did. And in my life, that moment was a seminal moment that said, if I was against discrimination, why would I not be against discrimination in all its forms? And that shaped so much of my thinking in life. I've told many people of this story, but I've never told Rod. So I called him, and I told him this story. And I said, I write about you, but I've never told you what I learned. So you learned a lot of things at Rhodes where different perspectives. It allowed your debates to be more richer, your perspective to be enriched, so that you're not one-track mind. You listen to other views and you listen to other perspectives. The other thing that was interesting was the issue of the SRC. So over a while, we felt that there is no need to have a PSM. We must participate in the SRC elections. And that was a seminal moment where the SRC president became our president. And many subsequent SRC presidents, Daryl, Mzim Gudlwa, all of those guys, Rod Dixon, Rod Amner, and others became our presidents. And this room upstairs became our home. For me, Prof, unfortunately, I was not well endowed with the attention skills that other people have. So I would not really go a lot to class. I would wake up and come here and deal with all of these things. But knowing why I was here, I did not miss the academic side. But I had to do that, not with great passion. I had to do what needed to be done. So you would see a lot of that when you're here. This was the lifeline of the student movement. Here in all the societies that we're here. Then there were battles. Then there was the formation of SASCO. You correctly pointed out that the walkout of SASCO from SASO from New SAS happened here at Rhodes. But the unity of SANSCO and New SAS happened here at Rhodes, at that great hall. And I look back at that with great pride to have been asked to be part of that first executive as the first deputy president of SASCO, standing for non-racialism, and to see a future we had wanted to have. The last thing I want to say on the political stuff is the battles on exclusions. These were difficult battles where we were fighting for academically deserving students not to be excluded on financial grounds. And we would spend most of our time, so when I glibly talk about the time we spent here, we're spending with people. People will come with their case, I'm about to be excluded, here's my academic record, all of those things. I know you all remember academic record. Yeah. Academic record was very important. So those things were very, very important battles. And then what is called negotiations, I'm sure the SRC president knows this, negotiations with the administration. Those were amazing engagements. Dr. Henderson, who was Vice Chancellor, and those were intellectually enriching conversations we used to have. Sometimes when obviously intellectually you get to a point of you have to find other arguments, but you are fighting a bigger cause. So those were interesting things, and I think we learned, all of us, from that. Now, one of the things that was interesting was I was appointed BSM president in my first year. And so the Reverend Mayor, we were staying at this, we were in the Smarts hall. So I would walk in coming from the university negotiation. And then he would shout from the other side of the room, "Ah, here comes our president. He doesn't even have a single course. I wonder what you say to the university vice chancellor on our behalf." So when I eventually passed my first courses, I could say at least I have some courses. So those negotiations were very, very, very interesting. I now want to come to relationships at Rhodes. This is a place where a lot of people fell in love. This is where many couples found their love journey. It started here. It's also a lot of places where people met people and got married with them, and also a place where people lost their innocence. Some of the first heartbreaks, the first breakups, the first fights, there was no module for that. You learned the hard way. One of the amazing things in relationships was visiting women's races. This was a mission, a very difficult thing to accomplish. Firstly, there has to be agreement that you can visit. Then there were calls. Sometimes your calls would not be accepted. Your messages will not be relayed. Or your message will be relayed but ignored. Because the messages will be written in those books. Hey! And you're phoning 15 times but there's no progress. But when you've made progress is when you've been allowed to come and visit. Now in the visit there are levels. The first level is you're met at the door and you can be spoken to at the steps. That's a breakthrough. But you must be seen by the other people that you are having this conversation. Because that is very, very, very important. The next stage is to be invited to the common room. Once you are in the common room, this is another level. The highest level is to be invited to the room. Man, you now are moving into the right circles. Now, even in the room, there are levels. Are you allowed to sit on the chair or on the bed? Then you do your scouting of the situation here. Are there pictures? If there are no pictures, okay, maybe. Are there cards? And are there teddy bears? If there's none of those three, there's a possibility. And then, after all of this, you still have to be taken to the jail. You go together. This is a signal to the people that something is started. Then there's what is called foreign policy. This is where you do not have somebody here, you have a relationship outside. The visit by your person was very important, both for men and women, because it showed that you have a person. It shattered the hearts of those who had designs or views, and then that person unfortunately would be subjected to all sorts of assessments. Very jaundiced views by those who had an interest, either men or women, when there's a visitor from foreign policy. One of the things that I think we must talk about, also the bad things. Being at Rhodes also sometimes made us to battle with how we deal with the township. So sometimes when somebody had a relationship with a woman from the township, there were derogatory words we used. And those are stains that we must acknowledge so that we are able to change. Because why is the difference if that person was coming from somewhere else or they were coming from the township? So these were things that we've now had to reflect on as we grow up and see what could we have done very differently. Then you have CNN. I was one of the people in the CNN. CNN was starting. CNN was when you know what's happening. Because I'd sat in all of these underground meetings, I used to see people. Then I said, oh, so-and-so, oh, okay, so there's something. And then the vibe goes. Suddenly, everybody knows. Oh, how did they know? But I mean, we know. And we broadcast. Gossiping was a specialty. I mean, if you didn't gossip, you were not at Rhodes. Because you had to discuss people. Now, the one other thing that was interesting was, I stayed at a place that is, what is that street we went to Tapel? African Street. There's a room there, Diggs, I stayed at. There's 4 of us at the top, 4 of us at the bottom. It's directly opposite the family planning. And my window looks directly there. And because I was a naughty bugger when I was young, if I see somebody, I'd say, hey, so-and-so, how are you? I see you're active. Now, when you think about those things, now you're like, how could I do that? But we were stupid and young. Then there was special relationship from Forte. There were many relations from Forte. A visit from your person from Forte was very important. So there was a special relationship, Prof, with people from Forte. I want to talk about the Rhodes academic life. The first is the dreaded Doni. Doni, is it still there? The Doni does not mix to the club. One of them is not going to succeed. If you mix Vic and the club and Doni, something is going to be missed. Then there was a double lecture. Double lecture was not child's play, right? And then the distance for those who stayed at the hill, coming back, let's say from the law faculty or divinity, to go to Goldfields at lunchtime to just eat. And what will you eat? Flat meat. I don't know, Prof, whether in your transformation you've revisited flat meat, but flat meat and veggies were an ideological struggle. Some of the lecturers we had were very special. I think that for all of us, there are 1 or 2 or 3 lecturers or professors who meant a lot to us in our journey. In my own life, I remember Professor Beard in the politics department. I remember Marion Lacey from the politics department. Marion Lacey would give me books, and I'm going to Port Elizabeth. I must give them to the late Govan Beki. When I come back after 3 weeks, there are detailed notes that Govan Beki has made on books published from overseas, which he couldn't access. But through the university, he could get those. Those were people like Marion Lacey. There is a tree out there in her honor. Marion Lacey was incredible. In the law faculty, Professor Grogan, Mr. Olshich, Professor Kerr, Mr. Midley, Lamberis. These guys were strict. They didn't care about your story, just have your cases. Would come back from running away from the police and detention, it's fine, but my case? Where's my case? Then wardens and sub-wardens. These were a special breed. These were the fathers and mothers that you did not have, but they were here. They instituted discipline. My word, I now know when I deal with my kids, how I was like. I needed a warden, as my children need a warden. Then there were courses that people took to add to the academic record. Ham, history and appreciation of music, was a great favorite that people had. For those of us who were in law, the stopping of Latin was a great victory. Because in order for it not to spoil your academic record, you would go and you go, when you think, no, now this is not going any further, what do you call, you cancel, what is it, you? Deregister. Yeah, you deregister. Because then it doesn't appear in your thing. Yeah. So I was deregistering, and luckily, eventually, the thing got scrapped. My academic record is clean. There are no issues, because I didn't have to deal with Latin. So Latin was a big issue for a lot of people in the legal fraternity. The other things on the academic side were results. Results, Prof, I don't know about other institutions, are published at Rhodes. They are put there in the notice board. You can do all your thing and talk and do whatever. In the end, what are your results? You know, today we have social media. I'm sure there's nobody here who doesn't have a profile picture. A profile picture is something you work on. Yeah, no, you don't just take in the morning or before you sleep. You work on it because this is how you want the world to see you. I mean, even if you are fighting with your person, you are not going to post that part. You post the one that says, love lives here. Because this is how you want the world to see you. Children, you can be fighting with your children and they're making you mad. You want to strangle them. You're not going to post that. You're going to post bundles of joy. So social media picture of your life at Rhodes was there. If you had beef with somebody, you went to look. So one friend of mine, who's one Dileposo, he's from here in Grahamstown. There were people from Grahamstown who thought it was a bit a pity. So they would come and look for his results. And then they found out, unfortunately, I'm sure because of apartheid issues or whatever, he didn't really do that well that year. And so he's walking across the high street, and a young child says, Putswai, uferishile. So the child was telling him, Tswai, you failed. So in his normal way, he took it in his stride. He just said, my child, that's not coming from you. that is coming from your family. And the family members were so embarrassed because they'd been talking about Tswana. So your academic record, Prof, meant a lot. And we used to pride ourselves in what we call straights. Straights is when you complete the degree in the prescribed time of the university. Now there were people who had experience, who took longer. We are not here to judge. These were apartheid times. But for those of us who did a straight, I know. You made people to know it was straight. 3 years is 3 years. Yeah, you must do the thing. Then there was MIP. MIP was another thing. Minimum initial payment. Without MIP, there is nothing. Just MIP. No MIP, you have to come to SRC. MIP, SRC. You come here, we must negotiate. MIP was a big thing. DP. DP. You don't have a DP, it's like not having a license. You can't drive. Then our student number. Now we have IDs. Student numbers were our ID. I remember mine even today. 688 MO522. That is my ID. So these are things sometimes you will not know how attached you are to an institution unless you talk about these things. Some quick personal stories. Because of some activities that happened when I was younger, and I was new, this was a university, I was banned by Bradeza and others from having any relationship on campus in 1988, which I thought was a very undemocratic step. And they told me, we are earmarking you for presidency, so you're not allowed to have any relationship on campus. And then I met the love of my life here. It now turns out that she saw me when I was speaking. And then she said, this guy, and they said, not that one. That's a dog with 3 tails, not that one. So when I first saw her here, I realized now I have to mobilize for the ban to be lifted. And I'm happy that the ban was lifted. And we've been together now for 30 years. Having met at Rhodes. And we've been married for the last 21 years. So there is a lot of things that people connect to this institution. And I'm happy, Pradeza, that the boycott was lifted. I understood the errors of my ways. Thank you very much. Then, when I was a student, now, when I'm not busy solving people's problems, I cannot go to class because there's nobody to solve. There was table tennis here. I would play this table tennis for hours with anybody who's not attending. But the critical time is lunchtime. This is where you have a big crowd. And you have to carry the stick. Every time you are unbeaten, you carry the stick. Unfortunately, the love of my life would stand there. Because the relationship was still new. And she wants to make sure that it's happy. Now I have to give up the bat and go back at the back of the queue. And guys, I said, no, I'm just waiting for you. There's Vaz waiting for you. Okay, relationship, bet. Relationship, bet. Then I think, no, I don't want to be part of Ngopsok. So I'll go. But the conversation in 5 minutes, how was your day? Did you go to classes? Okay, bye, I'm going to lunch. I have to get back of the queue. The lunch crowd is gone, but it was preparing me for the next 30 years that you make these choices. So our lives were not just the difficulties only. There were a number of things at Rhodes that happened that shaped us in many ways. One of those is that I had chickenpox on campus. this became a big gossip thing. And I want to condemn all the people who were involved in that gossip. Because it's not something I would have done to them. Everybody was talking about my chicken pox and the visit of Chris Hani and the fact that I have to be healed by the time Chris Hani gets here because I cannot infect an entire grade hall. Thank you to Zva, I healed and I was able to be there. Then another thing that people gossiped about was the fact that I broke my arm in a soccer game out at All Saints. And we had brought a lot of alcohol. And these people with no sympathy continued to consume all of that alcohol with no sympathy about my problem. Then I was with a plaster for something like 6 months. And then one day I go to a function, a party, and I have a fight with Mavuso. Mavuso pushes me, disabled as I was, and that became the gossip of the campus that Mavuso has beaten me up. I am very glad to Penyo and Swai and others to tell me not to retaliate because there was no way I was going to retaliate. You spoke, Prof, about the graduation boycotts. Yes, one of the most painful moments was not coming to graduation. And that year, we had taken a decision to stop the boycott. But those of us who were leaders at that time felt that it would be inappropriate for us as leaders to be going to the graduation the very year that it's lifted. So myself, Sim Chabalala, Neville Cheney decided not to come. There were no phones, we couldn't text anybody, we couldn't tell them, we just took our decision. But it backfired on us because the university was offering or conferring an honorary doctorate to Dr. Mangosuli Buthelezi. The students now felt we had deserted them. Because now we're making them to graduate with somebody they didn't approve of. It broke my mother's heart. And it's something that she's always had. So when I did come for the LLB graduation, she was happy, but I didn't do my... Then I'm happy that I came back here to the institution, I think it was a couple of years back, because it showed me that my suspended expulsion was no longer in effect. We had a case here on campus, which was in all the newspapers. It again hurt my family because I'd been expelled from school at high school. I could not be expelled again at university. So myself, Kule KK Papiane, and Vuzombebe, who were in this case. And students would make noise. Professor Surtees was the prosecutor, and Mr. Ulshich was the proctor, it's called, eh? And this case went on, I think, something like 3 weeks. We were represented by Tika, Mr. Bloom. Yes, so he represented us. Luckily, we got a suspended expulsion, which was abused by the people I spent time with, because if I did anything, they said, you are on suspended expulsion. And unfortunately, I was alone, Vuzo had left, and unfortunately, KK had lost his life. Then the university offered me an honorary award. It was almost the most painful decision whether to accept. And why would I come to Rhodes and accept what was called an old Rhodian award? It meant a lot of soul searching. But in the end, I said to myself, this is about those with whom I traveled the journey. And on that day, I honored them. And in my acceptance speech, I honored them. And I could say, I have reconciled. And that is why, when we had the Fees Must Fall, we could be part of saying, can we find solutions? Because we're part of the Rhodes community. Also, there is 6 gentlemen. They will kill me if I mention their names. Mr. Jacobs, I'm sure, knows them. We have been working over the last, I think, 10 or 12 years to build a Rhodes Black Law bursary. We have taken 6 students through university, paid for everything with them. And it was just about us doing this thing. In September, we will have our first get-together with them. We've never met them. We've always just got feedback about what they do. Mbuso Mtali, who's our leader, interfaces with the university regularly on this. So it says that there's a lot of things we can do with small little steps, all of us in our own environment. As I try and close, I want to acknowledge some pain. There was pain. If you don't look at it from the people who went through the pain, you will not understand. There were many people who were academically excluded. Because just the environment and their own academic preparation just didn't create the environment for them to succeed. I'm not talking about people who didn't go to classes and were delinquent. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about those who, if we had intervened, I'm also talking about those where, if we were more sensitive to mental health then, we would know the impact of mental health in people's performance. We didn't know then. My God, I hope we know now. Because we are losing our children through this. There were people who were also financially excluded. And as you say, Prof, they were academically deserving and they were financially excluded. There were cultural clashes where people didn't know the world we came from. And the institution was not ready for us. And you would walk into a class and you feel that every time you speak or you say something, you are of less value. And most of the time I would say the way to revenge was through the academics. I used to say, I might have paid 50 rand in my school, you might have paid 500,000 in yours, but my God, we're going to write the same exam and I'm going to beat you. Because it was demeaning in many ways. Yes, others didn't really know what they were doing, but there were others who could have been more sympathetic. And there was a lot of pain that people still sit with today, self-doubt that came from that. I think also you had an environment where the people who sent us here made so many sacrifices. We don't honor them enough. The sacrifices they made. If I take about my own story, my mom and my dad didn't go to university. So my mom didn't know much. You know, now I had a person. And therefore, a relationship has to be helped. So now I didn't have the funds. So, and I had a loan at FNB, Mr. Durant. Mr. Durant, I am indebted to that man. Part of Mr. Durant's thing, he gives you a book allowance at the bookshop. So if I wanted to take my person out, I'll go there, get a book and get some chocolates. You understand? But there are now things like you have to go to a restaurant. Now there's no money for that. So I would phone my mother and explain to her that I have a problem, I have to go to a tutorial, but I'm the only one who can't go because I don't have the money for the tutorial. My mom didn't know what is a tat. She would think that a tat is paid for. That little money I would get would help me to take my girlfriend to Spare. I mean, Spare was it at the time. Or if it's a birthday, to go and get teardrops. Teardrops, American sweets or stands. But they sacrifice so much. So sometimes when we talk about our successes, we must not forget the cows they sold, the goats they sold, the things they did, the extra jobs they had to take us to where we are. What makes Rhodes unique? We are small and intimate. Unlike large institutions. I've studied in many institutions across the world, but there was something about Rhodes in its small and intimate way that made us to build relationships. It could bond people from across the country. We don't emphasize enough what it meant from people who came from other provinces to come to a Xhosa dominated environment and learn learn Xhosa and adapt to these environments. Class backgrounds. People came from different class backgrounds in this institution. Rhodes also had the foresight to attract some of the first students from across the continent. It was unique in that way. If we're going to build this continent, we have to get the best brains from across the continent. So if you think about the future, I do want to pay a special tribute to those who can't be here. People like KK Papian, Mvuzo Mbebe. These are guys who made us who we are. But I want to leave us as alumni with this painful question that I was left with at the Harvard Business School by Professor Clay Christensen, who asked the question, how will you measure your life? Because he met people he studied with. Some of them had been estranged from their spouses, they had no relationships with their children, they were corrupt, others were in jail, and all of that. The question is, do we define ourselves on the basis of material things? The sizes of our cars, sizes of our jobs, sizes of the positions we held? Or is it about something more important, the difference we can make in the lives of others? And as you correctly pointed out, Prof, how we make others feel. So, hopefully where we can contribute to respond to your challenge is to help Rhodes to continue to see transformation and excellence as two sides of one coin. There are two sides of one coin. I am not impressed by institutions that are excellent but they are not transformed. Neither am I impressed by institutions that are transformed but are not excellent. They demean us. They humiliate us. They embarrass us. Transformation is not mediocrity. We've earned the right to be here. We've qualified. We ask for no favors. We want competence across the board for everybody. We want to support you in a difficult process of continuity and change. It's a very delicate matter. If you just change, you don't know who you are and what your ethos and what your identity is. But on the other hand, if you don't, you have to do continuity and change. Our role in society is to lead. You have produced us, and you say, well, leaders learn. What do we do to lead? Leadership is not a title held. It's an influence felt. What is our influence in the broader society? We are the most unequal country in the world. And we are getting more unequal by the day. What would make the people in the UK to vote Brexit? What made the people in the US to vote for Trump? What made the people in the Middle East to be in the Arab Spring? It's that sense that the status quo does not serve us.
Yes.
All of our institutions and all of us as individuals have to find a way to break the cycle of underdevelopment, poverty, and unemployment. It won't be done through slogans. It's the best brains coming from the best institutions to come with the most creative solutions to solve some of South Africa's intractable problems. And putting your institution at the center of that is so important. And we need that. It is our responsibility to change this country. Nobody else is going to do it. We have to find our voice. Beyond those who make the loudest noise. Behind those who make the biggest threats and vilifications. The dumbing down of intellectualism for 10 years was unacceptable. It is unacceptable. We belong to this country. We may respect people in authority. Oh my God, but they must never think we fear them. We never feared anybody. And we're not about to start now. The gender agenda is not complete. There is deep pain in this country. We are causing untold misery as men. Rape, sexual harassment, abuse. We have to be the men who stand up and say, not in our name, not in our environment. Then I want to respond to the last two things you've raised. The first one is on ethics. Our country is riddled with corruption, from the highest levels to the lowest levels. What is the role of a university in instilling a new ethos to young leaders before they lead? To ask them the question, why do you want to lead? Is it the perks? Is it the power? Is it the position? Is it the privileges? Or is it a higher calling? And help them to think along those ways. An old Greek tale talks about an innovator called Daedalus, who was imprisoned in an island of Crete. He designed wings for him and his son Icarus. And he says, son, try these wings, but don't fly too high, close to the sun, lest your wings melt. Don't fly too low, lest you hit the water. As he went out and he soared, he forgot about his father's advice. And he went too close to the sun. And the wings melted. And he crashed down and died. Our job is to give the Daedalus advice to our young leaders. To say, don't fly too close to the sun, lest your wings melt. Don't fly too close. Where is that advice? The institutions have to prepare our young people for the positions they are going to have. They get great results, great academic results and so on. I want to leave you, Prof, with an African story of a Barotse king. His story is told by Thabo Mbeki in a conversation in Mozambique, sitting under a tree. And they tell the story of this chief of the Barotse tribe was summoned to come to the palace where the king resides. And he was told the king had died. Obviously, he was distraught as the chief that the king has died. They said, no, you now are going to be king. Everybody expected him to beat his chest. Everybody expected him to be happy and excited. And he said, you have just killed me. They said, what do you mean? He said, for the nation to rise, I must die. That is the kind of leaders we want. The leaders that have a sense of selflessness. So some of the actions you've taken in your personal capacity speak to that journey of the Barotse King, who had the humility and the selflessness to understand that it is not about him, it's about the community. Guard this institution, protect it. There are great people who built it, live it in a better place than how you found it. I thank
you. Nuggets of gold that were layered throughout that speech. What I particularly picked up from your speech in terms of how things also change or some things stay the same. Early on in your speech you talked about formal dinners. For us as Rhodes University or Rhodes students, we still have your welcome dinners and your farewell dinners. So some of those things that have stayed with us. The common rooms, environment has been a change. Your jewels, your house parties, that has changed a bit. And unfortunately, drinking at the union is not the same. It's not a whole lecture venue, so a lot of us going over are very much sad about that. So it's a whole lecture venue now. Also with house sports at Rhodes University and also learning about that environment as well. I think now we've adopted a culture of at rugby events as well, and how societies, Rhodes has still kept and maintained the numerous of societies. I think we have up to 80 societies at Rhodes University. And in terms of your discussion around politics and the nature around BSM and how also Chris Hani is also being a product of Rhodes University itself, and also your point of selfless leadership, I think that inspires also for young people and an attribution or a quality that we aim to also carry with us in leadership. I take this opportunity to say I noticed I can resonate or correlate where the SRC and BSN joining up with. In my office I have the previous presidency frame, so I can tell the change within the leadership of Rhodes University as well. Donis are still the much hated thing. Every student still has a dreaded Doni here and there. Double lectures, I think that's more left for your postgraduate students, but that's still a dreaded thing. Dining hall menus, it's been a mission of our SRC to change the dining hall menu a bit, so that still hasn't changed much. Results, thank goodness we don't live in your age. Our results are not published, so yeah, so that's still a very much kept secret for ourselves. And also with the MIP, thank goodness that's now gone. That's gone. DP is still much a dreaded two-letter word that the students fear, and also the establishment of the bursary. That's by far is a great help. Thank you so much.